I'm Chase.
And I'm Timothy.
And this is Customer Service.
Morning, Chase. How are you?
What to do, Uncle Brondo?
Should I say afternoon?
Ooh, it is afternoon. We've been in this room since we got here, so.
Yep, it's just full of whatever we've breathed out. I can't wait to be outside of this room. We had to stack a couple podcasts.
I got Chipotle on my desk.
Oh, congrats.
Something to think about.
Congrats to be tired for the rest of the day. I don't know how you guys do it. God bless you.
Yeah.
You and I digest food differently.
Yes, sir.
But good for you.
I'm not as young or as resilient as I once was, but
I just can't eat a big lunch. We don't need to get into this.
It's all good.
I just can't, like, lunch can't be a time. That's the smallest meal I have.
Yeah. I feel that.
Anyway, so we don't get sidetracked by this, because I had a question that I was like, that'll take way too long. Let's get into it. We have our friend and artist, painter, etc. model,
buddy,
Noah Schneiderman.
Yeah.
He is. We have known him through modeling. Really, is how it started, and just being interested in fashion. It's like we kind of get into this a little bit, but it's like, fashion out here is a small world. You know what I mean? You meet the players pretty quick, and we had an if you build it, they'll come sort of situation. Yep. So we met him and his girlfriend at that point, asking him to do some modeling for us, just got along well. Always had fun chatting in between them, doing stuff for us. And it's been really cool to follow his art career from the time I've known him till now. So it's really fun to talk to him about that and process and what art means to them. He's from the Midwest like us. So it's just kind of like, I think in some ways a unique approach to things, or a unique kind of like background to have going into what he does for a living. Yep. So it was fun to talk to him about that, and like, how he puts that into how he goes about his process, and how he puts that into other mediums and things like that. Yeah. So, you might have heard of him through his most recent collaboration with Lady White, which was really great. I think it's all gone, but there is another one coming, which we allude to. And if not, like, I hope that you'll go and check him out on Instagram. He's easy to follow. Just look up his name, and you can check out his art and where he's showing and everything that he's working on. So I would strongly encourage you to do that too, because it's really impressive stuff. I mean, I don't have anything else. Should we get right into it?
Yeah. It was a solid episode, a little bit of a longer one too. So
yeah, it's fun to talk process with people. Yeah. To me. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. All right. I got it. We're feeling good. How are you, man?
I'm pretty good.
You good?
Yeah, just been really busy. Today is my first day off in a while.
Damn, what have you been doing?
Well, I got a job recently, like about a month ago.
Ooh.
Just working at this like bakery.
Cool.
Sort of thing, like 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm also doing some like part-time studio assistant work.
Okay.
For this other artist, and then I'm also like working on my own shit, and so I'm just like,
it's a lot.
Yeah, my weeks have been like pretty packed this past month. So today is like the first time I've been able to just like be home. Like,
nice.
Yeah.
Let's do normal stuff. How's LA? Do you like it?
Timbo, are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, okay, cool.
No, we just launch into it. We do an intro separately, so we just sort of like pick up and we just talk about whatever we want. So
I figured you'd like kind of chop and screw it, and
yeah, we're gonna slow and reverb the whole thing, so don't worry about
it. LA is cool. I'm like a little over a year and a half in now, and I like it more and more, or like I like understand it a little bit more and more. So yeah, it's taken a while to get into a rhythm, especially because like most of my time here has been spent just making paintings, working for myself. And my studio's here at the house, like in my garage.
Nice. Yeah.
Dope.
Which is super nice to not have to commute, but then I'm sort of like locked into my domestic / workspace all the time, and have to find like ways to get out, and so now that I have a little bit more going on in my schedule and like reasons to leave for work and stuff. It's been nice because I get to like hang
Nice.
out, like parts of the city and stuff too.
Yeah. Listen, man, I've just come under the realization in the last couple months where I felt like I was sort of a Denver apologist. Denver really sucks shit, dude. Like,
Oh yeah.
anytime I go down there, it
Oh, yeah.
fucking sucks, man. So I can tell that you agree. It's not. You're happy to be out of here. I know you're settling into LA, and you come from the Midwest as well. So like,
Go ahead. Sorry.
that was it. Just
Okay.
I'd be happy to be out of here. But
Yeah, no, I mean, I have like so many fond memories of Colorado, and
Yeah.
Colorado is like a really special place. And I met so many amazing people in Colorado, you guys included, and like there's like a cool sense of, community out there that like because it can only exist on a certain scale,
Mhm.
it stays intimate and it stays like everyone's kind of like in it together in a way.
Yeah.
But like, so I love that aspect and like nature, of course, but as far as like a city's culture goes, Denver really is like lacking in that
Mhm.
arena, and that's been like the thing that's been most apparent moving away. Because yeah, like you said, I'm from the Midwest, like never really experienced cities growing up much, and um, so Denver was like a good move in between LA, but now looking back, like, and I think also getting other people's opinions who have lived there, passed through there, or visited, and they'll be like, yeah, it's kind of a weird place. Like, it's like really techy and corporatized. Like, the whole city is becoming a little like corporatized and almost like a meme of itself or
Yeah.
something.
It's
And
like it's like I like Colorado in the sense that like I think that if you're able to make what you're doing work in like I don't want to say suburbs because it's different than like the suburbs we maybe grew up with in the Midwest, but like if you can make Boulder work for you, if you can make any of the other surrounding, suburbs work for you, I think it's like, like you said, access to nature is incredible and there's pockets of cool stuff. It's just it's so separated. You know what I mean? Like even when, Denver in particular just feels like it's like it happened without a plan. You know what I mean? As far as like scale goes. So I feel like it's kind of like locked in this weird size where it's like, it's not really attracting a ton of younger people. It's affordable-ish, but not like Chicago. Chicago's way cheaper than Denver, and it's got more going on. And like it's not like developing enough because I think honestly, it's probably like there's not enough young people there doing cool stuff,
Yeah.
and they haven't made it like super affordable, and that would attract more people to like make it younger and cooler. And the problem is it's not really getting younger and cooler. It's kind of only catering to the people that are already there.
Yeah.
And it just kind of doesn't. It gets like stagnant. I mean, a lot of cities do this, but like
And
it's definitely that situation because it's like otherwise Colorado would be ideal. The
Colorado's
weather
dope,
is
yeah.
like great. Like you get all the seasons and none of them are crazy. And like generally people are cool, and like it's like it's good, but it's like it's just that the city aspect just never got it together. So if you're doing things like you're doing like art or something where you really need to be out there and have the most eyes seeing what you're doing, and you can't like we can do that online as well as have an in-store thing. That's a different story for like trying to get yourself out there as an artist. I mean even musician, any sort of like that kind of world Denver's gonna be a difficult place for that.
Yeah.
So I get that.
yeah, it feels like on the culture front, it's sort of just like a facade or something. Like it's just enough to get by, to seem like to the like average person that there does exist some sort of like culture or like that the city cares about the arts or something like that. When really it's just like they sponsor a week of murals,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's kind of like the extent of, I mean that's like maybe a gross generalization because there are people doing cool things and there are artists in Denver making cool stuff, and but it's
Yeah.
not, it doesn't exist at the scale that it might need to in order for the city to reflect that. And identity or something.
Well,
Yeah.
like, how do you feel about this? Because this is how I always saw it, like, where we're from. Like, we grew up in, like, the hardcore scene and stuff. And the thing is, what you ended up getting was, like, an amalgamation of hardcore. It wasn't, like, anything, like, New York had, like, a specific type and, like, and you could walk between the different types, and those different types had different scenes. We got, like, metal, hardcore, emo, whatever it is, everything was at the same show just because it like couldn't support that many, like there wasn't enough people interested in each individual facet that you could spread that out over a long scene. In some ways, I think that's great. Like it just brings a bunch of people with similar interests together, and then it just, then you all influence each other, and I think that's great. I think that sometimes small towns end up doing that, like our smaller towns end up kind of making an interesting like art scene or music scene or whatever, because they're like so many different types influencing each other, and that's like a cool thing. And it brings a lot of more interesting people together. But then at the same time, if you just move that over to like where in LA or whatever, you get these like hyper specific things that, and each one can be supported because there's enough people doing that kind of thing and enough people that are willing to like support it and buy it and like invest in it and things. It's a different thing. I mean, like certainly one can be a bit easier than the other, but I don't know, maybe one's also a little less diverse at the same time. Like I don't know, like it's like a checks and balances game of like what an art scene of any kind can really look like in any given city. Do you feel like do you feel like, does that feel accurate to you?
Like having moved to LA and experience.
Yeah, have experienced like maybe a little bit of both of those types of things.
Yeah, I think, like you said, just the sheer amount of people with those diverse interests to create those separate scenes, and then they all like sort of, or not all of them at once, but plenty of them Venn diagram with each other, and there's like a swapping, an exchange of like ideas and people floating between different things. I've experienced that here for sure. And it's just amazing. I think that like with a city like LA that's so vast, like things just happen so fast. Sure. It's just like boom, boom, boom. Like, and there's like brief moments of it feeling like a small town because of that overlapping thing. We'll run into the same people at a different kind of like at an art show versus at a concert versus at a wine or whatever. Like there are these little like watering holes where like everyone's kind of put into the same group, and then they go out and do their own thing. Like it's interwoven, maybe a little less spontaneous than a place like New York because of like the traffic situation and just how kind of stretched out LA is in comparison. Like there's no, public transit isn't really exist in the same way, but it has its own feeling. It's definitely, it's like exciting. It's energizing to be in a place where, but also exhausting because it's like, you can almost have like choice fatigue because there's something happening every day or night or whatever that you could potentially go do. And then it can be like, man, I need to like chill out.
Yeah. I mean, I always felt that in Chicago where like I missed that, like no matter what the situation was, once you've gotten like you're involved with a couple different groups of people, there's like always something happening somewhere at any point, and it really becomes more about the choice to like put yourself out there or not in any given situation, more so than it is like, is there an opportunity out there, which I think is like maybe more like where we're from. Like I just always was like anything that came up we were going to do because it was only going to happen like once a month maybe, you know what I mean, if we were lucky. So it's like I like kind of felt like I had to take advantage of things, whereas when I got up there it was like, oh man, I don't even know what I feel like. I mean, I didn't realize how like you're saying, how much choice you'd have suddenly, which completely changes the way you kind of think about doing stuff all the time, which is unique.
And maybe it helps narrow in like what you actually like doing.
Yeah, definitely.
You're not just doing the one event of the month or whatever it is. You can choose to go to a museum or to go to this like show or this pop-up or like this food thing that is only happening this weekend or whatever. And that's nice, it's nice. And like feel like I've been able to I guess, expand my own sense of self and to be like, okay, what do I actually care about, and what can I be put onto here that exists or that I'm experiencing for the first time because I'm here for the first time, or I'm in a big city for the first time.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's like, do you think it's affected your like output of art much, like positively or negatively?
I think so, for sure. I think that like it's definitely affected. I think it's affecting the way that my work looks.
Interesting.
And like from like a palette standpoint, it's like this is a very different environment than Denver is or than Colorado is. Um, and I think I've like internalized some of that Colorado Southwestern palette
Yeah.
and my work that I think will just kind of be there. But I've noticed this like the introduction of these like really sort of acidic and brighter colors because like there's billboards everywhere. There's like
Yeah.
everywhere I go, there's like a lot going on at all times. So there's almost this like overload of information that is being distilled into the work from just sheer experience of being in this new place.
Yeah. How would you like if someone's listening and they don't know you or what you do at all, like do you have like a way that you could like elevator pitch your art?
Yeah, I think so. Um, yeah, I mean, I have been really interested in materials in the past year and a half or 2 years.
Hmm.
Or my practice has been a lot more material driven and process driven, and so I got into natural dyeing during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. I was just doing clothing for myself and for friends, and then I knew that it would probably cross over into my painting practice at some point. And then it finally did, and now for the past like 2 years, I've been naturally dyeing all of the canvases with different plant matter, sometimes food scraps, barks, roots, flowers, stuff like that. And then for the past year, I've been experimenting with the sewing machine, just like kind of patchworking the dyed canvases together.
Mm.
And
Oh, sick.
I'll take that sort of surface once it's stretched over a frame and use that as the sort of jumping off point for my painting. So then the paint goes on top of that, and it's a way to sort of, the dye helps guide my hand in a way. Like I get to lose a little bit of control through that
Mm.
process. And then it becomes more of a call and response between me and like the painting and what I'm working on.
Because you don't
And
really know, you have no way of knowing if things work necessarily until you start doing them.
yeah, and then it becomes like cloud gazing or something. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what do I see in this?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Got
Mm-hmm.
it.
like about lifting something to the surface where it might look like a figure or a tree or any number of things, and then I'm sort of following the pattern that the dye laid down, and then like reinserting myself at some point to be like,
Hmm.
no, it needs to go this way, and then like listen to that. Like, is that what the painting wants? It sounds kind of like woo, but that's how the process is for me. It is kind of woo. It is like a spiritual sort of
Hmm.
engagement, and yeah, I just like this idea of like following nature too. It's like nature knows best, and that's what kind of like the work becomes about. And then it typically is more mystical
Mm-hmm.
leaning imagery. And then it also is, it becomes an object. It's less like, what is the image here? But it's like an interplay between image, and then there's these sewn seams. And like I've sewn t-shirts into it, which kind of, you know, echoes back to my own interest in like clothing
Yeah.
and like this down sort of garment feeling that, you know, it creates this like physical quality to the work that I'm trying to consider the whole thing and how
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
object. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because I think that like a lot of people have like they'll know what, like, especially in our world, they'll know what like burrow is, or they know what like wabi sabi is. Like these kind of like artistic theories kind of woven into like for them maybe like more like a commerce based kind of thing, because you know of it through looking at buying clothes or whatever it is. So you kind of know what these like theories are, their general interest because of fashion. And but like how that actually works from like your side of things or the artist side of things when you're putting that together, what that really means, I think is really unique to hear, just because like, I mean, I've always felt with it, as especially as I've like gotten interested in like making like ambient music and stuff, when you kind of have to let more and more control go of things, like, especially like growing up in like punk music and everything, the point isn't to be interesting necessarily. It's like to make someone feel something. So your whole job is to go, I'm going to make something that makes somebody else feel the same way I feel it. You know what I mean? And that's like, it's a very like, it's a human connection. It's a very specific visceral thing that I definitely felt when I was younger, that I still care about so much now and have so much nostalgia for, but I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. It'd be hard to make that music again to a certain extent. I mean, I can repeat it and I know the tropes. I could make the music, but I'm not going to be able to try to like, I wouldn't be able to infuse the kind of same stuff because I have to infuse it. Where what you're talking about are like as I've learned with like making ambient music, you sort of have to like, you start and you're just experimenting and allowing things to happen and then go, now I know where it's my time to come in. But you have to like sort of wait for it to happen. And I'd say, I don't know, for you, I mean, you're much more trained and it's a different type of medium, but it's certainly a lot of like half the time you're like, I don't know if there's anything there for me. You know what I mean? Like there's something, but it's not, that's not right. How often do you think that like you're saying, as you're letting something dictate, is there never a point at which you know when it's ready? You just keep experimenting until you like it asks you for something, you know what I'm saying? Or do you sort of like, are there times you're like, this has gone too far, this one's done, this one didn't work out, it wasn't for me, you know what I mean? Is like, are there points when you know, or is it just like a total gut thing and you just work through it no matter what?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am very like materially conscious, and I don't really know where that comes from. I think mostly it comes from materials are expensive, and I don't want to waste that of material.
Yep.
And so it's sort of like by any means necessary. Like all the offcuts from when I'm sewing stuff get stored in my flat file, and then I'll like rummage through those and like piece something together from just scraps. Or like I had dyed a t-shirt for a show I had in Taos, New Mexico at this gallery called The Valley. And I had one of the shirts left and just not enough canvas. So I like ended up cutting the shirt in half and like sewing it into the canvas. And like it was just like, I need to, get there. I need to like use this all up. And so in the same way, to answer your question, when it comes to the painting, like it is a lot of looking sometimes,
Yeah.
like mostly looking. It's like you do a thing and then it hangs out for like a couple days to maybe even a couple weeks to as long as like a couple years. I mean, I've had paintings kicking around my studio for like 2 years or something, just waiting for like in a not quite there state. But then I have other stuff to work on, and I turn it to the wall so I don't have to like see it and have to like be in my zone, and I can kind of shift my focus. But eventually things get picked back up and with a fresh eye, because even a day can change something for better or worse. It's like I can make something I love today, and then tomorrow it's not holding up. And then a week from now, it's still not holding up the way that I had that initial excitement when I first did it. And then I realized that maybe I was just being like impressed with myself or something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually like where it needed to be. And so I think when it is finished, there is a gut feeling of like, it landed somehow. The plane, like I landed the plane.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, I mean, and can be a trope too, because I don't think suffering is required for art making necessarily, but it can be a like torturous thing when you just work on this thing and it's just not working out, and that's when you got to kind of like shift gears. At least this is how I work. Like I rarely abandon something. You
Hmm.
know, it's just like it's not time for that to be finished yet. Or I try to everything's like an experiment in the studio and almost like a lab or like a test site. So like I'll test something out, an idea, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. But at the end of the day, it's paint. So like I can just paint over it. I can just
Yeah.
keep testing ideas. And that's actually what I'm interested in is like how time stacks up over like uh these different ways of being or like these different ideas like stacked on top of each other create something brand new. It's like a network of like failures and successes. Sometimes I'll sand things down and then like this I'll like put paint on a palm sander and like rub it into like with while I'm sanding, you know, and it'll create this mark that is like completely unexpected or something. And
Hmm.
then that actually like through the kind of destruction of the thing becomes like the new jumping off point for like what it could be, if all that makes sense. That was a
Yeah.
long-winded answer.
No, it totally makes sense. I think that, it's interesting listening to you talk about the art because it's like, I think that like people's interest in art is like in kind of two camps. Either you've kind of grown up with it or found a place where you like truly appreciate it and then you follow it, especially like given mediums and you start to learn more about it. Because it starting to get into paintings, especially like modern paintings or something, feels like trying to get into, I've talked about it before, but like trying to get into jazz. It's like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what's good and what's bad. I can only tell you what viscerally I'm responding to, but it could be, you don't want to say the wrong things, but it could be an uninformed, piece, you know what I mean? Like the same reason, like, pop music's great and there's a lot of levels to it, and until you've listened to a ton of it, it can be hard to know at what level I'm at, you know what I mean? So it's like a difficult thing. And I think that another unique thing that you don't hear people talk about as much is like a couple of things that you've touched on, and I'm sure it has at least a little bit to do with that you're from the Midwest like us, where it's like there's a practicality that comes to an artist lifestyle, especially when you don't come from, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you were raised in it, I don't know, but I'm saying that like traditionally in the Midwest there's not a ton of fostering that type of thing. It's much more practical, not necessarily a super arts focused place. I'm sure there's niches that people will correct me on, but overall, I mean, it's a generalization, but it's certainly not as supportive as like the coast can be around it. There's just not as much knowledge. There's more of an ignorance thing than anything else to it, and certainly not like supporting that lifestyle necessarily. And I think that it takes so much. Like I wonder how much work that you've had to do on yourself personally to like be better. And here's why I ask that, because even I hear you like push back on your own, like talking about like the woo woo of the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, cause I feel this way too. Cause sometimes I feel those connections. I feel very drawn to that kind of stuff, especially ever since I've had a kid. I just feel so much more in touch with that kind of stuff for whatever reason. That was like my reckoning for that sort of line of thinking or being okay with talking about it. But even then, I'll still be like, I know this is going to sound a certain way. I feel like I have to like I have to qualify it all the time. Do you feel like that you've had to go through a little bit of a change internally to like be more okay and get better? And do you still feel like that you have like a ways to go, or do you feel like it's just you were born with it and it's always been okay for you? If that makes sense. I want a weird way to ask the question, but
Yeah, yeah, I mean, growing up in like the super small town that I did in Southern Illinois, there, like you said, like how you guys experienced probably growing up, there was not like a lot of that infrastructure for the arts or that it was even like a conversation, you
yeah,
know?
sure.
It was like you knew people who could draw good, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
kind of how it was. And I was like that kid in my school, like where I just had a kind of a natural sort of doodling or
Hmm.
a desire to like doodle and you know, I would sketch and stuff. But then like in school, once I hit high school, it was like there are no art classes because I went to like a K through 12 school that was like pretty poor. So like, you know, that's like one of the last things to
Sure.
receive funding at
Yeah.
a school like that. And so I didn't even really have like any art classes in high school but I was like skateboarding and I was interested in clothes through skateboarding. Definitely starting out from like, you know, this sort of like skate brands to oh, like streetwear is a thing. I was on my little like Crooks and Castles
Hell yeah.
joints back in the day and sneakers and like stuff like
Hmm.
that. And then I was like, oh, maybe this is like what I want to do is like start a streetwear brand or something. And so I like fresh out of high school, I went to like a community college for a year, hoping to like take marketing classes or something. So I'm like, I have all
Hmm.
these ideas. I just need to know how to like
Yeah.
pitch this thing or like sell it or whatever. And then like that first semester was really pretty boring taking all those classes. And then the second semester, I'd gotten a chance to take some studio classes. So I took a painting class, a ceramics class, a 2D design class, and that's actually where I started painting. And that's where I was like, oh, like I didn't even know that, a painting could be about paint. Like it could be about the material that it's made with, and that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be this other thing. Or like whatever I preconceived notion of like what art was kind of shattered at that moment because I was getting shown like some cool documentaries and like we were landscape painting or like working on stuff in the studio. It was the first time I'd ever been able to be in that environment. I chose not to go back to school just because I wanted to save money, work that next year, save money, and move. And so that's what I did, and I moved to Denver with two of my friends. But ever since then, like painting stuck with me.
Mm.
And so I think that like from that point, continuing to paint and just be interested in like making something, I became obsessed as one does. Like, and as you guys have experienced with music or with like clothing, like you just get obsessed with something and then you like you go through your own education, whether it's like your own research or like peers or homies that you've got, and you're exchanging ideas and stuff. And so I think like that's just like a little bit of the background into like how long I've been painting probably for the last 9 or 10 years since that point, and that process of educating myself and learning, from that one class and my friends was like just I just kept wanting more. I kept wanting to know more. I kept
Hmm.
wanting to see more things. And Instagram is like both a blessing and a curse for that because
Sure.
you can't see everything. But then when you're doing the thing, you're like, wait, I suck. Or like everyone,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
seeing like all of art history
Yeah.
on your phone and contemporary painting on your phone or contemporary art on your phone. And then you're just like comparing like a whole million of people to, what you do. And then so it can become this like this thing that is both inspiring and also like really humbling. But the to answer the question about like the more spiritual side of things or the kind of mystical
Hmm.
experience of making something in the studio, like I think maybe at, I'm sure that I had to come to terms with an old way of viewing things, or I had to question myself or felt insecure at some points about talking about it in that way.
Yeah.
But I feel like you experience something enough times to where it becomes like fully real to you, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's the point I've come to at this point in my practice is just like I know that this zone exists where I am in this like flow state and there's almost this third hand there where like I can't take full credit for what's happening in the studio. And you hear other artists, and I've heard other artists talk about this, and it's one thing to hear it and another thing to experience it. And I feel like that's like chasing the like you're chasing the dragon in a way. You're like, as an artist, you're always chasing that feeling because you come across it, so
Hmm.
it's not just like some like delusion of the mind. There's like some force there. I feel in painting and making things, using your hands. So yeah, feels. That's how I'd answer that
It's
question.
always funny that like the people that you feel like you have to convince into that type of shit are the ones that like have no problems understanding how that could exist in sports or mowing their lawn or doing other things that are like normal that you could experience and for some reason with art then it's like, well, okay, and it's like, well, wait a minute, why can that exist almost anywhere else in life but in church, in basketball, in whatever the fuck it is, and like but like for some reason with art then it suddenly becomes its own thing. It really does make you think that there's like generations of people that like really did want to that art. For some reason, I think it unlocks something in someone that people don't like. I don't know what it is, but like, why else would that have like that weird connotation to it that like someone doesn't want that to be okay or like or feign not to understand it or whatever? Because it's been really interesting. I always like to doodle and stuff. I never had like a natural I don't know what you call it, fine arts or whatever. It was more like music was that for me. Like I just understood how to like express myself with it quickly. Never having learned anything, it was just came out of me. I knew what to do. I knew what I wanted it to sound like. I knew how to explain it. And I think that, but like watching my daughter who's now 5, she loves painting. She paints almost every single day.
She's like
watching
artists.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's really wild to see like just how quickly like she can go from any sort of mental state into doing that, and it's a whole different world. And you can tell like she's in another place right now. Like it doesn't matter if I'm here. She goes and like turns on music by herself that she sets the tone and sets her space, and I can tell that she's thinking when she wants to mix colors like what she wants it to be. And it's like, man, it's like having that. I'm really jealous of people who find that early on now. You know what I mean? Like a way to express themselves quickly and not like be able to turn off the thinking about it even sooner. Because I think, it was not like, musicians, artists, anything like that coming from where we're from. It's not necessarily like the strongest encouraged thing in the world. Like it's like impractical and,
it's all about the function. How's it going to make money?
Yeah,
what purpose does it serve?
Yeah. And even if it never made her any money or wasn't what she wanted to pursue full time, the fact that she has that like loaded and ready to go whenever she's like feeling that sort of need to express or create something is like killer. You know what I mean? And I wish definitely more kids had that available to them, because I'm in the same way. Like we had art class, but I was telling my wife the other day, I was like, I don't think we did anything. We'd make like one clay thing a year, maybe, if the kiln was working, and it usually was not. Maybe you'd make some paintings, but like the palette was limited what you had access to, and you had to like wait until other people were done. And like there was no money, there was no activation in this space at all. And it's been even kind of hard to like, my daughter goes to like this like, I don't want to say it's fancy, but it's this very nice art class thing here in town that we found for her so that she could continue to learn. Because I think that's the other thing that's important is when you're young, if you don't, no one teaches you, and because I don't know anything about it, like I don't know enough about it, like I need somebody to help her keep going, because I think that'll help her get better and want to do it more. And you go around all these kids that are like, man, you're so supported and good, and like you're thinking, I think that like younger kids are maybe thinking about art in a very different way than we did, because like you said, it's kind of Instagram has become this like great equalizer of things, of like you can put yourself out there and your art. And yes, is there the comparison issue? 100%. I think that is the killer of a lot of things in life, the comparison that happens because of the internet. But at the same time, if maybe I wasn't just been like, here's Rembrandt, me being like, I don't think I get this or care because it was made 1 billion years ago, and the story doesn't really resonate with me right now because I'm 15, and if I could have
seen a textbook at school, and you're forced to be there.
But where else was I going to see contemporary art that felt like it was coming from people like me? I mean, other than, I will admit, in skateboarding was probably the first time I started to see like a lot of artists, whether it was like from kids getting into graffiti writing and kind of going from there, or kids getting into designing decks and shit like that. Like you just see it infused in other things. I guess I just never even thought it applied in that way. It could only go on a canvas that you then put in a museum, and there was no other way to go about it. And I think that like the internet's made it so much better to like see that there's all these different avenues into pursuit of art, different mediums that I didn't even know about when I would have been younger. And like that your peers are doing it and expressing them in some way, and you're able to find some community around it. So it also seems like this insane blessing too. I mean, I don't even know how it affects the art world that much, because I mean, I follow it a little, but like this would be not a lot compared to what most people, I mean, I'm sure people that are deeply into it are. I don't know where I was going with that, but it just is it's an interesting thing to see, like, just sort of like how younger generations are sort of redefining like art and showing art and selling art and all this kind of thing. Do you feel like that's touched you a lot, or are you still going through it like maybe in a more traditional way? I don't know if there is a more traditional way, but
Yeah, I think it's definitely affected me. I guess just in the access to be able to share something that you made instantly with so many people is like unprecedented. No other time has been able to do that so instantly. And there's like online shows now that people will curate. I've been invited to take part in online shows where they've had an architect design a virtual space.
Oh my God.
And I'm very much, in the camp of like, I think all of that is very interesting and cool, but because of that object oriented way of seeing the work, my own work, and just the way I feel about art and painting specifically, I would rather see something in person like a million times over, just because it's a completely different thing in front of something versus where everything's cropped into like this big, like an 8 foot by 8 foot painting and an 8 by 10 inch painting exist at this scale on your phone. Like they exist on the same scale on your phone.
Yeah.
I realize you can't see me. But yeah, so that, yeah, there is like these tons of pros and cons to, this new age we find ourselves in terms of, how art is shared and how art is seen. It's definitely affected me though. I think Instagram's been a huge blessing for me because I don't know. I mean, I've gotten so many opportunities from people just reaching out to DM me or to, people who have been interested in buying my work, just DMing me straight through Instagram. It's like this sort of shortcut into the art world in a sense. You can kind of go through the back door because the art world is such a gate kept place, and that is, I think, touching back to what that question about like why do people have this perspective that art can't give you this feeling, this like elated feeling or whatever it is, like, but maybe sports people can see that, or mowing the lawn or doing kind of mundane tasks, and maybe that part of that is that there's a stigma around art being this upper class, more snobby sort of world, and that is because of how gatekept it is, and that is a real shame because art literally is for everyone, and everyone, also going back to what you were saying about your daughter, it's like I think everyone could be an artist had they been given the support at that young age.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's amazing that you're able to do that for her because she obviously is like so driven and excited and is like lit up by the act of doing that. And I think that unfortunately gets taken away from people at too young of an age. And I think everyone has access to that. But a lot of people are raised to be serious people, and painting or playing around with colors or drawing or things doesn't feel like serious activity. We've deemed serious activities to be like commerce based or I mean, I love sports, but like sports is something that's culturally accepted maybe in a broader sense than like the arts were.
But I don't know that they're that much different ultimately. You know what I mean? It's just like different ways of expressing yourself or using yourself to do something bigger than you. And I think that it's like like what you're talking about as far as like fine art goes and how people digest it or consume it. It's so similar different but similar, because there's like fashion is so tied to commerce. It just always has been. It always will be. It's just part of it, and it's seasonal and all these things. But the internet's made it a completely different thing than it used to be. I mean, when I first started, it was impossible to get connections in that world. It was impossible. A handful of people had them. If you weren't from it or in it, you weren't going to get in. And not to say that it isn't still this way at a certain level, but certainly even at the level I wanted to be at it, and it just felt impossible. It felt like I had to, and I had to work very hard to make the connections I did, because the internet was still, I mean, not the internet, but social media was still, in its infancy of how like people were using it. And then things changed, and now I've said it on the podcast before, but I get 12 to 14-year-olds coming in talking to me about Raph Simmons, and she's like, "How the fuck do you know who that is?" Like, I had no way to get that information when I was younger. I wanted it, but had no way of getting it. You know what I mean? It wasn't really available to me in any real way. So you feasted on these like weird little internet like hubs where you could kind of talk to some other people or try to get information. You still get clowned on all the time, but at least you could there was a way in if you needed it, and really wanted it. But now it just seems like anybody can do it. And now these younger kids, maybe Virgil got him into it, and maybe then they glommed onto a couple other Raph Simmons, maybe as an example, Rick Owens, whatever it is. You get stuck on these handful of designers, and maybe you don't carry that on, and that's okay. In the same way that I don't play as much music as I used to, or whatever. That's okay. But at least you have this baseline appreciation for something that's being made and how it's being made, and what the community represents, and how it can interplay in your life, and bringing paying for real beauty in your world. And I think that is such a cool thing that will have long-term generational effects on people positively, that I think is so great. I mean, I think it's look, do I think that there's 10,000 too many streetwear brands? Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, would I ever poo-poo somebody trying to do it? No, because why not? What are you going to do? Lose a couple $100, $1,000? Who gives a shit? And then you put yourself out there. And I think that anybody who's had to put themselves in that vulnerable position, I think that's a net positive for themselves and for the world. I mean, because it makes you take that. I think there's a lot of stigma around even someone getting into art. I've gone with my daughter to buy the supplies, and to be at the arts place, and I'm like, man, a lot of stuff's cool. I really like watching her mix the colors, and I've kind of enjoyed helping her with it, because I like color, because that's what I've always been interested in with fashion, and how you make it play together. And I've always had these color theory books I like looking through, and it's fun. And but there's this weird thing where I'm like, well, I'm not an artist. I don't know what I'm doing with paint or anything. But it's it shouldn't matter. There is no, that threshold should not matter between really just being interested in really doing something. Whether it doesn't mean you have to make it anything more than that. It should but it's that barrier that I think is an interesting place, because I think people also do that with clothes all the time. We see it whenever I say they ask me what I do for a living. I'm in fashion, and automatic response is always, oh, well, I don't know anything about clothes, or you can tell. It's I'm not judging you. I don't care if you do that or not. Do you know what I mean? It has nothing, in the same way that if I told you oh, I've been painting, you're not going to go, this fucking guy thinks he's better than me. It's it's not that way. No one thinks that, but it's a weird, these things do have that weird, line that I think is really strange, that people are very nervous to cross all the time. And I don't know how you get rid of that long term, other than introducing it to younger people and encouraging them just do whatever, because nothing matters, really. Yeah. And I think it's getting better. It feels like it's getting better in a positive way. But
yeah, I think that's also just an unfortunate consequence of capitalism, is that everyone is expected to be this, you have to be a thing. If you're painting something, you're am I a painter now? Am I an artist? Am I expected to be an artist now?
Yeah.
There's all of these boxes that the world provides for you to shut yourself in, and that is not the point, and then with the capitalism bit, then you're oh, should I monetize this? Everything becomes a sort of side hustle or something, and then you're that's a crazy pressure to put on yourself for something that you just like to do. Not everything needs to do that. And I think that with all of that hanging over people's heads, even on an unconscious level, it can be prohibiting to want to even begin, because it's like, I don't know what you said about like starting the streetwear brand or like just going out on a limb to do anything. I agree 100%. It's like the first domino has to fall.
Yeah.
And whether you continue to do that thing or not, it doesn't matter. It's just like, it's just like the first step in the unraveling of like a potential, like who knows what could happen, but you could learn something from it, or you could meet someone from it, or whatever. And that's a beautiful thing.
It's been a really interesting thing to I just keep going back to my daughter, but it's the only way I really have like a connection to that type of art specifically. But where, number one, you don't just want them to show you something and go, it's great, I love it. You know what I mean? Because that also, I feel like over time starts to feel insincere. So I always want to be like, I'm genuinely interested. Tell me about what it is. What did you do? How did you do it? And try to be more intentional about how you talk about it. And I think that's a good first step. Second step has been like also watching myself be like, I remember she was doing like a charcoal thing and she smeared it. And it was just like, she's like a kid, you know what I mean? She just wasn't thinking and I was like, oh no. And it was like, well then, but then I took a minute and I was like, she did more. And I was like, well, no, this looks better actually. And it's like, man, you have to be so careful. Cause I said, I made her feel like, oh, she fucked it up. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize I didn't even mean to do that. It was just like a natural response to what happened. And then now that thing that she's been working on for a little while has turned into this whole other thing that I think is way more interesting. And it's just a weird thing to like start to learn how to talk about things where you're like constantly being encouraging. Cause I think that, number one, if you're making art, I don't see any reason why you have to. If you don't want to put it out there, then don't put it out there. Not everyone needs to make money through doing that thing. Not everyone should. You know what I mean? And that'll either you'll naturally get weeded out there, or you won't. And even if somebody's like, I love what you're. I've shown people like music stuff I've worked on. They're like, why aren't you putting it out there? I'm like, because it's not. That's not what I'm doing it for. It's not for that. That would make me feel not good. And I just don't want to do that. It's like a therapy. It's like personal therapy for me. It's nothing else. It's all it is. You don't have to put it out, number one. I feel like that's one thing that people get a little caught up in. It can just be an exercise that's like a way to take personal time for yourself and like enjoy an experience that, is creating something that doesn't have to be monetized. Like you're saying, it doesn't have to be something you're eventually going to sell. Cause that can also feel like shit when someone's like, who would buy this? You're like, I'm not fucking trying to sell it. I'll just put it out there. You know what I mean? Yeah. It just feels like such a, I just wish that whole world, and I hope it's getting slightly better. I think with people just being better about like I'm saying, about learning how to talk about it, and like, it's just, you never think about it. I mean, especially if you're ignorant to it at all. And it's my own problem, you know what I mean? Of like having to look it up on the internet and being like, how do you critique and talk about art without, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I want to encourage someone and also make them better. And taking the time to do those kinds of things. And through that, I've gotten a lot more interested in types of art. And I'm not looking to like make anything necessarily or whatever, but I just like to know about it. I think that if everyone could maybe start to take that step of like just not being so like, I don't want to say afraid, but it's like it's like things that you don't understand, just getting angry at them, or having certain expectations, like you're saying, of people to do a certain thing with. I'm sure you feel this way, Chase, with because people always see the stuff that you've done, and it's been like, do more. Why don't you do more? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you should for yourself, but like you don't need to do that. You don't need to take jobs just because you can do a thing.
It's
you know
the same thing. Doing it for money ruined it. It made it not fun. It made it labor. It made it stressful because there was a time period that it had to be done by. I was doing it for money, sign painting, and then ultimately all of the magic and all of like the fun aspects that I really enjoyed about it, that became like such a small percentage of it. And so I moved a year and a half ago. I haven't opened my sign kit at all. It's just in my garage, neatly organized, and then maybe one day I'll do it again. I like it, but it's just like also to the point that we were talking about too. It's like, what would I even do? What would I even do? What would I paint? What words would I do? Or why would I make an alphabet? It's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be in my room somewhere. You know what I mean?
That's more the argument I was having of like, why not though? If it's something you enjoy doing it, but it doesn't need to go anywhere. It doesn't have to. Like it doesn't have to leave the room. Now, how have you? I guess where I was going with this is like, how have you sort of reckoned with that sort of thing as like pushing yourself and becoming more successful. And I mean, you've shown in a lot of other countries and other places and have had to put yourself out there. And certainly a part of that is definitely selling art at a certain point. How have you done that without sort of like compromising yourself or your art?
By being really almost borderline dumb. It's like I feel like there's like a certain naivety or something you have to, or I need to like maintain in order to just like stay true to what I want to do and not like bend to the whims of the market. Or I mean, I don't know if you know, but the art market's been pretty tumultuous.
Sure.
And we can feel that on a bigger scale, like economic. And that's certainly like affecting the art market too, where like some people I'm sure are doing just fine, but like I know a lot of people in that world who are struggling. And, you know, that always, I feel like happens around an election year, and it's just like things are bad now anyways, but that is the time when it becomes the most attractive to play to an audience or something, you know, and that's the kind of like dangerous zone that an artist can walk. I mean, there's people want different things, so I can't speak for everyone, but I can only speak for myself that because this is this kind of like sacred thing to me, I have to check myself and be like, you know, kind of constantly be like, make sure I'm in this for the right reasons, and that I'm filling my cup in this other way, even if the money's not coming in, you know, like that's why I got a job, you know what I mean? It's like things are kind of shaky right now. Just gotta roll with the punches, and that way I don't have to compromise my own practice and turn it into something that I don't want it to be. And the naive part is this kind of like, I don't know if naive is even the right word, but I'm trying to constantly like challenge myself to be uncomfortable painting, and not, even though there's a system in dyeing, sewing, stretching the canvas, then painting, like that is a foundation, but everything else that comes after that can be anything I want it to be. And I want to see something new when I make something. So if I just keep making the same painting over and over again, I mean, and I'm impressed by people who can do that. But I constantly find myself being like, well, does this even look like my painting? Or I'm just like cracking open this, or widening my sort of like world of what my visual language or visual lexicon. You know, and that's what keeps it exciting and interesting for me, is when I discover something else that I wasn't doing before. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny, we've talked a lot about your daughter and like her own desire to make things, and the irony of like, I don't know, just like being an adult and trying to make things is just that you're always trying to get back to that place. Yeah. You're always trying to put yourself in that mind state where like everything goes. There's no rules, like you're just doing it in this very like pure way. It's sort of like this Zen idea of like beginner's mind. Like, how can I make this like I've never made something before? And what might that look like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even in what we do, I still feel most like what I really want to do is just impress my friends with something that we did that made it fun, which is basically what we were doing in the DIY scene when we were making shirts. And I just wanted to make something different that everyone else had, you know, and I wanted to put it out there in a different way than anybody else had. And it really had nothing to do with the music at a certain point. It just, I wanted to impress my friends with knowing how to build a website, or knowing how to put something on a long sleeve shirt instead of a short sleeve one, or, you know, whatever it was, just silly stuff like that. So I feel like I'm basically just playing house in the same way now. It's just with more chips, but it's the same thing. You know what I mean? There's not that many different. And I try to remind myself of that when I get stressed, is like, or I'm like not sure what to do next. I'm like, well, what would I do if this was that? You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. You're just trying to like, how do I purify something that over time can get muddy a lot? You know what I mean? I'm sure it's the same in your world where it's like, man, I don't want this to be gross, but it's like there's always an avenue to gross. And it's tricky because it's like, I hear what you're saying on the front of like, I can only relate it to music because it's all I know in this world. But like going to see a band live versus listening to a record is a vastly different thing. And it's something where even as I get older and it's tougher to go to shows, I still try to do it at least once a month if I can, because it makes you feel something viscerally that like you just don't hear on a record. You just don't, and that has to do with, every sense getting, enhanced when you're there, or it's sounding different. And I think that there's unique things, there's people like in Chicago, like Audio Tree, doing live recordings that sound better than the recordings themselves. And you can get that at home a little bit now too. And I'm sure that it's the same thing where like, I can see your paintings on your Instagram or whatever and be like, these are really cool. You know what I mean? But like, I'm never going to experience them in person is a completely different thing. You just wouldn't be able to capture the same level of detail, the size, the scale, the what it's trying to, and like, all the stuff that you're describing might get lost in a photo, in a picture that goes through a million different forms of compression before it's, it's just a different thing. At the same time, though, it seems so cool that there's the opportunity out there to follow a bunch of artists, understand what their general aesthetic and style is, and follow them like a musician to the point where like when you got to see something live or you get the opportunity to buy something, it feels like a whole different thing. It feels like a whole different, and I mean, because there's such a clear, I know that there's galleries and that's that's a different thing, but like a representation, but you go through like get to meet the artist, to get that close to the artist and get to experience something from them. I mean, art gives you that opportunity. I mean, not for everyone. I know it can be very expensive too. Not so much, but that's also like it's a little stigmatizing in that way. It's like, I don't know how much art should cost or shouldn't. And it's always been so gatekept, like you said, that like, I don't know what it should be. You know what I mean? If I want to spend the money, sometimes it feels like I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to go. I don't know what's good. Other than what it feels like to me. But I feel like this progression has made things better in a way to where like I know how to digest music in the way I just described. So if I can apply that through the internet to like physical art, great. If I can buy it online because I don't have the money, or I can't take a trip all the time to LA, New York, Chicago, anywhere else all over the world, that I can still like communicate with the artist and buy things from them. And I think that will, again, it's like just seeing things in its infancy that I think will be better. We just haven't figured out all the ways to make it better or optimize it just yet. So it's still a little murky. But yeah, it's just a tough thing. Art's such a unique thing as you get older, like how you keep it in your life and still be able to do it freely, like you're saying. And I think you're right that it doesn't necessarily require suffering for it to be good. It's just a matter of like, how much are you willing to put into what you're doing too? Because it seems as impressive to show constraint on putting the suffering into the art when you're actually feeling it day to day. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think it's a really cool thing that what you're doing and what you've dedicated your life to. I wonder if a lot of our listeners maybe have heard your name through following Lady White though. How did you get involved in doing things like that? Or how, I guess I know you from, we'll say this at the top, but I'm sure, but we know you from like doing modeling and stuff. And we know you from that just through being interested in fashion and things like that. So like, how have you, that's such a unique way to apply what you do, artistically into the fashion world. Is that something you want to continue to do? And also what was that experience like with those guys? Cause we love them.
Yeah. I love them too. It's a pretty great story, actually, in how I ended up meeting Phil and Taylor. Because, of course, I know you guys through the shop, and I managed Stedbrook for a while when it was still around. And before, I think you and the Lady White guys had, really locked in to a serious, business relationship. which I know you've known them for forever, and there's
I've
always
known Phil since way before Lady White. Yeah.
right, like there's always sort of been that thread. But like with Canoe Club specifically, I think that they were in town for a little like
Oh, that's
uh,
right. Yeah, a little event early on.
pop
Yeah.
up thing. And during that trip, maybe they were also like snowboarding or something.
Hmm.
But they'd come into Stedbrook with a couple shirts or whatever. I was the only one in the shop, and I'd never heard of the brand. And so they like showed me some things, and they like gave me one of the heavyweight tees, and which was really sweet. And I like loved that T-shirt. It was like so. It was like so. Such a nice weight. Um, Fit just right. I was like, wow, this is like amazing. And I remember it being, I was kind of helping with the buying at the time, so I was really pushing like if we got the chance to carry Lady White, it would be a good look.
Hmm.
Like you guys are doing like some really cool stuff. And then I remember for whatever reason it wasn't really working out or like high on the priority list. And then they like it's like some GQ article came out about like best T-shirt you can buy or something, and it
Hmm.
was Lady White, and then like by that time that ship had like sailed, as
Sure.
you guys had kind of like further progressed in your relationship and kind of had gotten exclusivity, and I was like, man, like I was like, I told you,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's good. And so, anyways, that was my first time meeting them. And then fast forward to 2022, I was showing some work at this art fair in Athens, Greece, um, with the Valley in New Mexico. And I had flown out there for it because, I just had to go. Like, it was my first art fair and also like first time going to Greece. And it was like September and it was still like just like really beautiful there, like kind of trailing off of the summer. And it was an amazing trip. But like on the second day, like the first day of the fair, I realized that Kate, Taylor's wife, was the guest curator for that
Hmm.
fair. And she was the one who invited the gallery that I was showing with to be part of this like one little like guest curated section. And so I was like, how funny, like,
Yeah.
really small world. Taylor and Kate were out there, and then Phil and Sarah were out there too. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy, like running into you guys. And so we got to hang out a little bit in Greece, which was like, a movie,
Yeah.
to say the least. But and then fast forward to moving out to LA, and I was stoked to meet up with them out there for the fair, just run into them because it was like a couple months before moving, so it was like getting to meet or like get to connect with these like people who are in LA, and we were right across from another gallery who was in LA at the fair, so we like hung out with them all week, and it was nice to kind of like get a head start in meeting people. And then when we moved here, my girlfriend got a job at a coffee shop that's right next to Lady White in the Arts District, like literally next door. And so I would be there. They always hook it up with a free coffee or whatever. And then I'd go into Lady White and kind of hang out with them. And having met them a couple times, and then so just like that relationship just
Yeah.
happened kind of so naturally in all these different places. And then I realized once we started to talk about doing a collaboration, as they got more interested in what I was doing and with the dyeing and stuff, uh, I realized their warehouse is like a 2-minute drive down the street from my
Yeah.
house. So then it became this like really easy sort of back and forth. I'd like go to the warehouse, like drop some stuff off for them, or pick up some shirts, run some samples at my house, go back, drop them off, and it was like so kind of neighborhoody
Yeah.
in a way that I'd never experienced before, and that's kind of exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation, where things just like happen like lightning fast. It's just like boom, boom, boom. All the resources are here.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it's been a kind of amazing like serendipitous path towards working with them, and it's been a lot of fun. We did our first collaboration a couple months ago, and I was able to like dye. I don't know. It's like handful. I don't know. It was like 30 some shirts with Mataru, which is this like red dye, and there's like all different shades of reds and pinks and stuff. And then we took like 7 of the shirts that kind of like didn't quite make the cut, and we just chopped them up, and then like we worked with their in-house sewing guy to piece the t-shirts back together, and then I stretched it over a frame, and so it was this sort of like
cool
the scraps from like in the same way that I do in my work, using the leftovers to make this. I'll call it a painting. There was no paint on it, but yeah. And then so we had that in the space for the event that we threw at the Silver Lake store, and my friend Amber did some like floral arrangements for them, or for us, for the event. And now they're like working with her to do like the Figville pop up at their shop. She did arrangements for them and is doing some other arrangements for them. So it's all just like, I don't know, it's exciting to see like how an interaction can domino effect again, like I was saying.
Yeah.
We always tell people when they want advice on like how to get in it or whatever, I'm like, just
kick it,
find your people and be around a lot and be interested and cool, and things happen. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we have any employee that we didn't know previously from hanging out in the shop. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just how it goes.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And that's maybe like one part of the internet that, can be a little bit of an illusion.
Yeah.
There's like a familiarity over the internet, which is great. It's great to like connect over the internet too, and then meet in real life and kick it. But there's this weird distance there that isn't quite the same as like being in the shop and kicking it and getting to know each other and like letting those things foster over time. And but it's so funny because like before I only met them that first time in the shop. This is before Greece. I was just like thinking like it'd be kind of sick I had like bought a shirt, or I had a white, it was that same shirt they gave me. It started to get a little worn in and a little, I was like, I might like dye this. And I had one of their bags, and I was like, I might dye the garment bag and send it to them as basically like a pitch to do.
Yeah.
Kind of just like on my own volition. And I didn't end up doing that, but it was this like seed that was planted in my head, and then it just happened anyways without doing that. So that was another sort of like serendipitous moment that I really enjoyed or thought was special. And now we're working on our second collaboration for the 10-year anniversary. So I just got the materials in today. We're gonna
do brick.
Yeah, this like oak and iron dye with them. It'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I've seen something else you were working on with them too. Or is it the same?
That is probably.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Very sick.
Yeah. I heard you tried to
order it all up. I like that.
I really appreciate it.
They were like, oh, well, first of all, they didn't give me any limitations on it. And I was like, this is sick. And I was like, so I put in like this big ass order, and they were like, oh, that would be all of it. So we can't do that. And I was like, got it. And I was like, why don't you tell me what I'm allowed to take? And they said, yeah. And I said, that'll be my order then.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it.
We loved it. So
cool.
That's a cool upcoming thing. Well, man, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but like really appreciate you having the conversation. I thought this would be a fun one, and I really think it was. I really had a nice time talking to you, man.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you guys. It's been a minute. I hope to see you guys in person sometime, maybe out here visiting Colorado again. I'm pretty overdue.
Well, if you're ever in Colorado, come through. We've also been had an LA trip on the books for a while. It keeps getting shifted around. So because we were going to do it in late October after we got back from Japan, but I think it's because we have to do something else. It's going to get shifted again. But we'll get there before the end of the year, I'm sure. So we'll definitely come check in. That'd be the best. Cool.
Yeah, cool. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah,
great.
Man.
Yeah, brother.
Appreciate you. All right, bro. We'll see you around.
Cheers.